risk and audit committees are still worried about the risk of non-compliance that could be legal, reputational, commercial. But the smarter boards, the more enlightened organizations, as I call them, right, they are now seeing this as a business enabler. And there's been this shift, privacy and compliance as defensive and accountability, but now into more how do we unlock the potential and use of data.
Welcome back to the AI Governance Podcast. I'm your host for this episode, Matt McCallum, and today we're diving into the heart of the modern data revolution. As AI takes up more space in the boardroom, the conversation is shifting. We've moved past the era of can we build it to the much more complex reality of how do we govern it responsibly. And to help us navigate this, I'm thrilled to welcome a guest who has spent over 25 years at the very centre of global data policy. Bojana Bellamy is the president of the Centre for Information Policy Leadership, or CIPL, a preeminent global think tank based in Washington, London, and Brussels. And if you follow digital policy over the last decade, you've likely seen her name. She's been recognised by Politico as one of the top people shaping European tech policy and was the recipient of the IAPP Vanguard Award for her leadership in the field. Bojana has a unique ability to bridge the gap between high-level regulation and practical, on-the-ground business strategy. Bojana, it's a pleasure to have you on our show.
Matt, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. So look, we've so much to cover, from the rise of agentic AI to the shifting geopolitics of data. But I want to start with the foundational philosophy of how companies actually behave. We often hear the words compliance and accountability used interchangeably, but you've argued that they're fundamentally different. So if we're looking at industries today, compliance requirements can feel endless. And in your recent work, you draw that hard line between compliance and accountability. So what is the difference? And what's the answer when it comes to AI?
Indeed, Matt. And I loved how you sort of framed this coming to data world and this big digital data revolution that we are really living through. And that's why accountability is just so much more important than simply compliance. And let me explain this. We at CIPL have always been promoting organizational accountability. And what we mean by that is the organization's ability to put in place, build and implement a structured program framework to address a particular legal or compliance or policy area, and then to be able to demonstrate that actually they do what they say, right? So for us, accountability is much more akin to embedding good practices and good behaviors in everything that you do, in products development, in technologies that you develop, in processes. And of course, we started with privacy accountability, where you sort of translate those privacy requirements, but also your own policy, your own standards, internal, external standards. You translate your code of business ethics because it's also linked to the values of organization into operational procedures, safeguards, behaviors, culture even, right? And so to us, accountability is just so much more than legal compliance. And it is actually something that persists and goes across at different areas of legal compliance. Law is not going to be enough for this new data world, right? And we see those clashes. Always goes behind the technology development. There are multidisciplinary areas of law. There are different tensions. Let me give you an example what accountability really means in practice. If you are a platform and trying to protect your users from, let's say, fraud or cyber attacks or online safety, well, you have to look into all of these aspects. You have to use their data in the way that ensures they're protected. But here you're going to have a privacy considerations as well. And so you have to address both. And laws may actually conflict even. Laws actually require you to do both, but they don't tell you how to do this. But accountability is actually thinking this through, having a risk assessment, having a policies and rules in place, and actually implementing this with thought. And of course, accountability is going to be more automated, and we'll talk about that, but that's the difference. I see accountability as very important in this new world because there is a trend of deregulation. The world and the C-suite politicians are seeing regulation as hindering innovation. And in those times, and we just have to address them, right? We need to double down on accountability because it is actually better and more suited for these different times. Secondly, it's better and bigger than compliance because it's about being business enabler. We see accountability as giving companies the charter and roadmap to move fast and don't break things. It's a little bit like safety belts, right? Like all the things we have in automated vehicles, autonomous vehicles or connected cars, right? That's really what accountability is. It enables us to use data to leverage data-driven innovation for new products, services, insights, leverage AI and be more competitive than somebody else, be faster, but in a way that is predictable, that gives us safeguards, railguards, gives us that charter to move faster, and ultimately builds trust with our stakeholders, investors, media, consumers, customers, B2B. And that's what accountability really means for me.
I love that take, because I think it's so easy whenever we talk about these things for people to think in terms of barriers, and everything you have said just now has been in terms of enablement, in terms of how it actually is what moves you forward.
And that's the smart companies are seeing it that way.
Yeah.
That's the boardroom has to move from defensive to proactive. It's about enabler.
Well, that's funny. That's what I was going to ask you. So you've said that before, that accountability requires it's a tone from the top. That's where it comes from. So when you're walking into boardrooms now in 2026, are you seeing boards treating governance as a strategic asset, or is it another fine to be feared? Are they seeing it more as a barrier?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, boards are very different, right? And companies are different level of maturity. Certainly, what I have seen is that even if you look at the last 6 years of GDPR, for example, global data protection rules, and now we've got AI rules. At the beginning, it was all more about how do we make sure we comply, how do we make sure we avoid that 4% fine. But and there is still that behavior. Look, risk and audit committees are still worried about the risk of non-compliance that could be legal, reputational, commercial. But the smarter boards, the more enlightened organizations, as I call them, right, they are now seeing this as a business enabler. And there's been this shift, privacy and compliance as defensive and accountability, but now into more how do we unlock the potential and use of data. We've actually done some really interesting work on kind of that is meant for boards and C-suite and management about having to have that shift, right? That holistic data strategy, because data is the most important asset. How do we unlock the ability to use data in compliance with rules, but also understanding the benefits and loss of opportunity if we are not doing this? So this is the way the board should be thinking. What is the loss of opportunity if we are not deploying this AI system, if we are not using data in this way? And then if you're accountable, you have got that ability to move that. So that shift is definitely happening. And I would like to see more conversations about this whole area of data regulation, privacy, cyber, digital, really as a matter of digital trust. And that's really where I would like to see the boards moving. I think it's starting to happen, but it is a slow one, right? And some companies that are transforming digitally, they're more quick to see this. Some that are not, they're a little bit more traditional, but that's the way forward for sure.
That's fantastic framing, though, that idea that instead of worrying about the 4%, stop worrying about that, worry about what you're actually missing out on. You're missing out on a lot more than that 4% that you're scared of. That's excellent.
And building the trust with stakeholders. I mean, you've seen even people like Satya Nadella, Microsoft, Julie Sweet, Accenture, the Google CEOs, right? They talk about this. We have to build products and technologies with those kind of requirements in mind. We have to do it responsibly. We have to do it in a way that people will accept and go on this journey with us. But of course, we must not do it, because it's the biggest moment in our history, right? In the way that all our societies and companies are transforming. So if we don't do that, we're actually going to we will lose the benefits of all of this, right? For the society and for all of us. It's not really commercial. It's really foundational. It's like fire, industrial revolution, digital. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. And I mean, talking about that and what's next, the obvious place that I have to jump to is Agentic AI. And I suppose keeping it under the umbrella of what we're talking about right now, Agentic AI, it's making decisions in real time. So whenever we're talking about that threat of fine, whenever we're talking about really what is more tick box privacy, does Agentic AI finish that? Is it dead? Can we assume we can move past?
And you probably have been checking CIPL's work. We just published a paper on agentic AI and some of these risks, challenges, but also opportunities as well. And we looked particularly B2B because, there's a lot of B2B deployment of agentic AI, but now we're moving to consumer as well. Look, everything that we talked about, all these tensions, and I'll talk more about that later, the challenges that we are seeing, how the rules are being challenged by technologies, that's going to get on steroids with agentic AI, because the idea of human in the loop is going to go away. I mean, agentic AI is not, it's not a tool that helps us to make a decision, which is how we use AI today, right? Today, we use AI in that way. Not only, there are more ways, right? But more and more it is agentic, where in fact, AI is making the decision. So we are delegating decision making to AI, and of course that's going to come with all kinds of concerns, and certainly on the privacy, cybersecurity front, but all the law of agency, the use of agentic AI with youth and children. Should we not? Of course not. But what does that really mean? How do you create these safeguards? And so we as a society really need to do much more digital literacy of people, so they understand kind of this next wave of agentic AI evolution or revolution, if you like to call it. So we do not believe that some of the concepts like consent are going to work really very well. We believe some concepts like, for example, which data which data should an agent access? Well, if you give an agent a role, it's going to access whatever it needs to access to get to that objective. So it needs to understand me as much as possible. It needs to have as much access to my data to be able to actually provide that service to me, right? And perhaps some other data. So, but will that actually completely erode the trust in kind of purpose limitation principle, or if it is sensitive data, should that be also accessed by the agents? And so we are going to have to really grapple with this as well. Human in the loop, again, I talked about that. That's going to be tricky, but it's possible also to think about some of the solutions, that come with accountability. So maybe there will be some human in the loop checkpoints. So we may say, if you're actually making a very high risk action or high risk purchase or high risk decision, well, that's what I do want to review. I may not need to review something else, but I will review that, right? There will be tools like, for example, encryption, for example, right? Or least privilege access safeguards, where you can kind of train your agent, or whoever is putting agents in the market will have to do it. And this is the problem, right, Matt? Because you have people who are creating agents, organizations, companies that are creating agents, but these agents are helping me in my personal life, consumer life, or business life. So what is my responsibility in terms of agentic use? What is the responsibility of those who have built the agent, and how can they, as much as possible, put those safeguards in the design of agentic AI? I think that's going to be important. So you could kind of have the least privilege, right? Or where you limit it to certain information. You could have tools like tools whitelisting. You can say, you can do that, or you can access this, but not this, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's the word. This is where accountability is going to be very important. And what I particularly think is going to be necessary, we talked about law and why accountability is not legal. Lawyers can't solve this. The only people who can solve this is technologists and data scientists, those who are building, developing products and embedding this stuff. And they have to work with lawyers and policymakers and regulators to understand and test, and then embed code. We have to code this stuff into the behaviors of agentic AI. So that's going to be, a trend that every organization needs to understand. So, these people, I know they're very expensive. They're very hard to get to. Their time is expensive, but they're going to have to be used for this engineering by design, safety by design, privacy by design, cybersecurity, huge complex issue, right? Agentic AI could open all kinds of new cyber risks. My final point of this is, and this is something that we talk about in the paper, that agentic AI will also give us new opportunities, right? So you can imagine agents who are now able to help us understand transparency and privacy policies. Everybody talks about not reading privacy policies. They're longer than Shakespeare's longest work, right? Hamlet, I think that was. I can't remember anymore. But so can you imagine if there was an agentic AI that was understanding how my data is used, where the privacy perils or risks are, or disclosures that I need to know? Well, could be a great use of agentic AI. Agentic AI can help actually with cybersecurity. Agentic AI can actually help us even with privacy compliance. All these rules and laws require us to provide copies of data. Well, agents can do that. Agents can redact and edit and provide whatever is. So there's going to be great opportunity as well. So with every technology, every step, there's going to be risks, challenges, but there are also opportunities. How do we harness that technology to help us solve the problems we have got today, or compliance challenges as well?
Yes, excellent. Okay. And well, I mean, I suppose you've, not to corner you, but you've made me think of one of the things that I wanted to touch today. So whenever we're talking about those agents taking action, I think that a big question that comes out of it, and I take your point, it's not for lawyers to fix, but I think it's interesting to discuss what that means for consent. I think especially everything that's happened, there's so much talk, even in the last week, I'm going to say, around Claudebot and so on, and people setting up their own agents on their own small machines. So if I do that, I get a mini Mac, I put Claudebot on there, and I have it book a flight for me. Do I need to consent to every data transfer it makes in the background?
You can't, but you can't.
Can I delegate that trust, or how does that work?
That's right. You can't. Look, we already have a problem with consent model because it's broken. And let me be completely clear with that. The fact or the expectation that you as consumers that are interacting with 100 applications every day, and agents in the future. Remember, agentic AI is going to change how we work with our computers, because we're not going to have screens and keyboards. Nor will we have apps, right? It's going to be very different.
Yeah, of course.
The idea that we will have to give consent for every single use of data, access to data, sharing of data it's even today broken, right? Which is why we always, as CIPL, have felt that you could execute control and you can be empowered as a person, because I believe we have to be, right? We are still humans, through other means, rights of individuals and the rule and the data protection laws, like access, correction, understanding how a decision is made. These are really important rights. Ability to complain or to review, get something reviewed by humans, that's an important right. Transparency, the requirements to actually explain to me when I'm interacting with the AI or how this works or what happens with the data, that's an important one. Accountability of organizations to make sure they conduct risk assessments and do privacy, safety, security by design before they roll a product on the market. That empowers me more, protects me more than some fake consent, because they're fake. I mean, today we're using this cookie consent where you all have to do. We just say yes, 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 or no, no, no. We don't even read, because people just do whatever they used to do. And talking about, so it's broken already. I think it's going to be completely broken in agentic AI, and there has to be some concept of delegated trust, that I actually give a carte blanche, but I provide some safeguards. So, I allow you to book the flights or to buy this for me in this price range, but I want to be consulted if it's something else. But that requires really very sophisticated consumers. We have to be much more sophisticated how we use these tools and what we know about that. And I'm glad to see, there is more education going that way, right? Look, we keep hearing about millions of people, I don't know, about a quarter of UK uses apps that are providing emotional support, companionship, bordering on kind of psychology, psychiatric help. We hear OpenAI is going to be launching, not in Europe, but in the US now, ChatGPT health-based. And so, do we see this entity, this bot, this agentic agent as a real doctor or not? How do we take their advice? How do we challenge that advice? Do we not check that with we're just going to have to change. And I think this is what worries me a little bit, that digital literacy really doesn't exist anymore. Yes. But I do believe that there are other ways in which we can empower people beyond consent, transparency will be important. And I think at the moment you have two sorts of people. The moment you're transparent and explain the use of AI, some people are either algorithmic display algorithmic acceptance and like, I accept this, I get it, and I will never challenge it. Could be wrong. Or algorithmic aversion, hate it, made by AI, don't believe, don't trust, never write. And so, that's we're going to have to evolve as people a little bit, right? I mean, that's we have done that when machines came first time around. We've done that in the kind of PC revolution, and I think this is going to change us as well. There's no doubt about that. So I don't have a very good answer for you, but these are the questions we need to discuss. And that's why the work that we do and the more organizations and their leadership and their engineers engage in these conversations, the better it is to be. And I'm seeing a lot of that as well at the moment. And that's good. That's being accountable, right? It's informing and thinking about these things before they happen, but not necessarily stopping because something can be risky. And we'll talk about sort of that, I know, for the future. What should future rules look like? Okay,
excellent. Thank you. And then, so something else I wanted to touch on, a slight departure is, there's a great deal of tension now between AI models' need for more data, for data to be accurate and safe. But the privacy laws that we've touched on, they're saying that we should be collecting less data. So, I mean, it's something I'd like to understand how we can reconcile that, the need for more versus giving the need for less.
Indeed. And you have identified this is something that we've been working for about 2 years at CIPL, and have been talking a lot that really the way technology is developing and how it works, it's challenging the very essence of our data protection rules and principles. And look, Matt, we are not there for the first time. We had blockchain, right? At time of blockchain rollout, the right to deletion doesn't exist because you can't delete things in blockchain. So, AI is just another one. Now we're going to have a quantum as well. And that's going to also challenge stuff because all of a sudden you can kind of break encryption through quantum. So, we have to keep evolving. And with data protection rules in AI at the moment, the tension is in number of areas. One is the one you've talked about, which is data minimization. Now, data minimization doesn't mean collect less data because it's actually not right. I mean, AI needs more and more data to actually come up with the right answers, or in Agentic AI to really understand how I behave. They need more data. We need more data to make sure we're not biased, we don't discriminate, that we are representing the globe, different languages, for example, right? So data minimization must not be understood less data. It must be understood the right type of data for the purpose of what we are trying to do. So if I'm building an AI application in health, I do need to have health data. I do need to train that model on the appropriate data, right? So it would be criminal, it would be negligent to actually not use the right data. So those are the trade-offs, right, that we have to think about. The purpose limitation is another one. In data protection laws today, the concept of I've collected data for one purpose and now I can't use it for something else unless you consent or I have to now comply. That doesn't work anymore. We know now that certain behaviors are creating patterns or revealing patterns. This whole concept of inferred data, observed data that, again, used for one purpose, but now there is a benefit of using it for another purpose. I mean, it's just like in medicine. We are now doing a clinical trial on X, but we're now seeing the side effects and actually benefits to something else. We can't ignore that, surely, right? And the same with data.
To then go, no, but we're not allowed that part.
Exactly. And so that's the tension. The tension is the one on consent that you talked about. So we wrote a whole paper about, what are those tensions? Transparency, explainability as well. The whole point of automated decision-making. The rules today are, almost requiring consents for automated decision-making. Well, but AI is automated decision-making, less and less with human involvement. So, and then the last one, which I think people don't talk about, and I know we'll talk about geopolitics later, but data, to be able to build a representative AI, you really need, a diverse data. Data needs to flow across borders. You need data from different countries, different regions. I mean, and in general, AI is predicated on on that data sharing, right, for different purposes between different entities, between different countries. And so the idea that data protection laws have got these barriers for data flows, that's also something we need to solve, right? And therefore, we do believe that it's time to evolve data protection principles, how they interpreted, how they are legally applied. We need to also challenge companies to think about these things. And one of the solutions that could also work, in addition to regulators and policymakers, making their own adjustments in interpretation, is to also think about technological tools like privacy enhancing, privacy preserving technologies. Yes. And that's where, again, those tools and techniques can help us unlock the potential of data without necessarily revealing personal data, without necessarily sharing across the border or sharing with the party, federated learning, and so on. So that's, I think, where a real possibility lies. But and I'm sure you'll ask me more about pets, but I do believe that it's not enough, right? So we do need some regulatory changes as well, and the way that regulators see things and how they interpret these rules. And that's the work we've been doing. It's a big global topic, and it's being discussed from the US to Brazil, Canada, India now, right? Korea, Japan, every country is trying to, and Europe. We have now, in fact, proposals in Europe and UK to slightly evolve the current data protection rules to accommodate for a better, to be better suited for this AI world, but in a way that still creates some digital trust, right?
Yeah. And well, so sorry, I feel like I'm zoning down in on one thing there. So I absolutely take your point. There's more to it than pets. But if I can push in that for
Sure.
our non-technical listeners, if you like, I get that you're saying there are bigger regulatory questions to be asked, there are improvements to be made. But for our non-technical listeners, does that so pets, the privacy enhancing technology,
yes,
does using synthetic data or differential privacy, does that solve the legal problem? Can a company say, we didn't use your data, we used a mathematical echo of your data?
It absolutely does. Yes. The answer is yes. Now, nothing is 100% proof. Again, we've done lots of work in this space, looking at both pets in general, privacy enhancing technologies, we call them pets, right? Yeah. And there are many of them, synthetic data, homomorphic encryption, federated learning, where you are able to sort of keep data on devices or keep data separate and just do the learning without actually sharing data, multi-party computation, all of the stuff, right? Differential privacy. And they're quite, these are complex techniques. They need lots of understanding and investments as well. But what we did was to look at different techniques, how they really apply in the AI lifecycle and also generally privacy. And they can help, right? Because you're not sharing data now. So, you have multi-party computation, differential privacy. You don't actually need to share everybody's data to actually get the insights from that data. Or federated learning, it sits on the device. I mean, everybody uses the phones. I mean, that's the best example. Lots of this data sits on our phones, but those phone companies like Google and Apple are able to build models and understand usage globally from all the data, even though the data sits there, right? So there isn't necessarily mushing and sharing and disclosure of data. So that definitely does help because, first of all, homomorphic encryption, synthetic data, you are not using personal data, so the law doesn't apply. And then the sharing doesn't apply, for multi-party computation or federated learning or differential privacy, or data flow restrictions don't apply. So yes. However, nothing is a panacea. They're not 100% waterproof or whatever you want to say. I have heard also from researchers, synthetic data, not always great, can't always help us in model training. It might help to a certain extent, but not always. Encryption is great, but look, we've got quantum coming. So what does the post-quantum encryption world look like? Then regulators sometimes are also very technical. They say, well, it's not 100%. The model is still drifting. And we can see, even though despite pets, that there is some possibility to re-identify the data in the context. Well, that's not helpful. So we need to, in my opinion, companies need as a matter of accountability, but also as a matter of business enabler, because it's about data, their biggest asset that they want to protect in every way, but they also want to use. So they can do that through PETs, privacy preserving enhancing technologies. In fact, privacy preserving technologies is the better word, PPTs, than PETs. It's not about enhancing, it's about preserving. So they definitely must invest in that, knowing it's not 100% good solution. But honestly, in this world of today, with all the risks and challenges, it is good enough. But then we need regulators to also say, yes, this is good enough, even though it's not 100%, because if they don't say that, we are not going to see the investment. And so that's a bit of a chicken and egg situation we find ourselves in. But again, lots of interest in these technologies. We've been having sessions and speaking about this, from Taiwan to Singapore to, there's a US, UK prize, the governmental prize for best pets, and there will be standards as well developed. And I'm seeing a lot of investment, but this also requires companies to be more strategic about this. If you're chief privacy officer or chief AI officer or responsible AI officer, you really have to have relationships and investment from your CIO, right? From your IT, chief technology officers, because that's where the money is coming from for you to be able to build something that actually works for the whole company, but helps with your privacy, cyber, AI compliance as well, but it generally protects data as well. So I'm a big fan, but we can't, as I say, not the panacea, but should be very helpful.
Yes. Okay. Not to be ignored. Might not get us all of the way, but not
No.
to be ignored or skipped by any means. Okay. And look, you've hinted a little there as we're going along to the fact that we'll talk about geopolitics. We can't have you on, Bojana, without asking about the fact that you were one of the architects of the privacy bridge concept. So today, like versus whenever that started, we now have the EU AI Act, the UK's new Data Use and Access Act. There's a variety of US state laws. With all of those going on quite independently, are we still building bridges?
Oh, I would hope so. So, globalization and bridge building somehow is not in fashion anymore. But despite that, that's what I do. I mean, my job is to be bridge builder, to be digital and data diplomat, and to try to make some sense in these difficult times. The situation has actually gone much worse since, the work we've started with privacy bridges. There was always this tension between US and EU, interestingly, between these two countries, which actually always have been allies on the topic of data protection, right? And for those of you who haven't been following this, it was always EU's worry about how US uses data for government access, national security. Having said that, European countries and governments do the same. But we were always coming from this high horse of GDPR and Europe being perfect always in terms of data protection, and everybody else never being adequate. So, so that tension always existed across Atlantic, and the way that data protection rules, GDPR, and those who have copied GDPR are structured is that there are big restrictions now on data sharing to countries that don't have adequate level of privacy protection, and then governmental access to data was seen as a big risk and big issue. And it was solved, right? It was solved. We had privacy shield, data protection framework now that keep being challenged from time to time by activists, but they are preserving and they're persisting for sure. But now so in privacy, we always had this moment of geopolitics and data that companies always had to deal with. It was always an issue of legal compliance and commercial issue for many, many companies. And data will always flow and will continue to flow. But now with the geopolitics and economic politics situation now, it's gone worse because we keep hearing more requirements for data localization because countries see data as a big asset that they should preserve for their own use, for their own AI development, as opposed to the things we discussed, which is, in fact, we need to share this in a fair, just way. Yeah. And so everybody gets the benefit out of it, right? So there is a lot of discussion on data sovereignty and data localization. There's big discussion on the whole overall digital sovereignty, so that the whole digital stack is actually not influenced by any other state. So ability of one country or one region to control its digital destiny, how they build technologies, how they use data, who accesses that data, and of course AI sovereignty now as well. This is what's happening, right? And you hear very strong views all around the world, and in Europe in particular, as a matter of industrial and competition policy. That Europe is lagging behind, and so now we have to build our own whole technology stack. So the world of data has become much more complicated, and I'm not sure companies can alone solve this. But I think they do need to discuss this at board level, because it does matter where your data is. It does matter where your data centers are. It does matter who is touching, whose LLM you're using, or which cloud providers you're using. And I really do believe that we are going to have some unintended consequences from this data protectionism that are not helpful. We did some interesting work on kind of what would be the real harms of data localization. I mean, fraud detection, cybersecurity, even compliance with the law, let alone medical research, know your customer, financial compliance, communications. I mean, so many things that we rely on, we will not be able to use. I mean, there's some interesting data which says if European businesses were now to start using Europe-based IT, the cost will go to 40 to 50%. Well, I mean, that's a lot. Who's going to pay for this at a time of economic pressure? So we really have to think very carefully what kind of world we are building, by being data nationalists. Having said that, we also understand why this is happening. So we need to address the reasons, the underlying reason for this data nationalism, data protectionism, and digital sovereignty as well. Government access data is one, but it's not anymore the only one. As I say, competitiveness, this race for AI is going to be is an issue. So for that, we really need a better global discussions and debates, and kind of what I call New Deal for data. The other thing that I do want to quickly mention on this call, bridges. I still think, Matt, that there is more that brings us together and unites us than actually pulls us apart. If you look at just data protection principles, or even AI, I mean, everybody talks about the same things, responsible AI principles, fairness, transparency, security, non-discrimination. I mean, we all agree on those, right? So
we don't have completely opposing approaches.
No,
yeah.
No, we don't. And I think sometimes the devil is in the very small detail that some sort of bureaucratic minds very interpret differently, and the devil can be at a big geopolitical level, which really is difficult to reconcile. But companies need to persist and work in that in those days, in this time, in these difficult days. The way maybe to address this is to say, if we persist and we go down that fragmented route, what is it going to mean for safety? What is it going to mean for cybersecurity? What kind of tools and benefits we are going to be losing by, to all of our population by going that way? And I think maybe that's the way to do it. Otherwise, you can't kind of make it black. It's not black and white. Yeah. It's just political. Well, so I do believe in bridges. Long answer.
Of course, and I hoped you would. And if you'll pardon the pun, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little based on what you just said. So the UK's taken a slightly different path from the EU. So, I mean, you sit in the UK Government Expert Council, and they're, the idea is being more focused on outcomes and innovation rather than rigidity and rules. So, I mean, is there the potential that the UK becomes a model for how to balance that regulation and growth? Or
I always hope so. Yeah. Okay. I always hope so. So in UK we have the council that in fact now has finished its work, but it was the data flows expert council, and there we wrote a really important paper that was endorsed by UK government on the importance of data flows and how to think about that in a multilateral way, and what does the future look like, what could the solutions look like, and I think everything we've written still stands, and it still is government policy, and I think many governments would agree to this. What UK has also done is that it has actually evolved its GDPR law. So we have a 2.0 regulation now in the UK, and some of the interesting things, exactly trying to resolve some of the tensions we discussed about the use of data for AI, importantly, use of data for R&D. We know that now, billions of dollars are being poured into internal R&D. Apparently, the 5 big tech companies' R&D programs is bigger than the U.S. Apollo and NASA's Apollo program that when it was launched in hundreds of billions. So that shows you sort of what. And so we want to make sure that R&D is actually that we've got the right data. The privacy rules are not a barrier to that. So UK has fixed that. It's fixed some of these annoying cookie consents. Having said that, exactly as you have said it, UK has also been concerned about maintaining this adequacy with Europe, because Europe is an important business trading and ally partner and ally. So the government hasn't gone perhaps as far as it could have in changing GDPR. That's not to say that more changes will not happen, and we understand they're still looking into how do we make sure that some of these data protection principles are really aligned with the AI more. What's the role of assurance? What's the role of standards? Some of the softer approaches, accountability, softer approaches to actually achieve the same goal. Now, but they do have to mention, this is really important for all of you listening as well, that Europe is also going through this moment as well. After Draghi report that really has identified this digital overlap, digital burden, precautionary principle as a big barrier to innovation, lack of legal certainty, and GDPR and AI Act were singled out as well. Well, Europe has just proposed its digital omnibus and some of the changes for digital regulation. So there's some really interesting proposals. Dare I say, CIPL has also published a paper in December. So lots of the things that we have said in our paper, we are seeing actually adopted or at least proposed by the Commission to unlock this Gordian knot of data regulation. And so, we just need to all move in that way. All the countries should be looking at this, and I know they are: Singapore, Brazil, Canada, Korea, all of them. US has got its own different regimes, but they're all looking at what's now happening, and we must not be scared to adapt for the new generation of technologies. Really, we mustn't be scared, because otherwise these rules are going to be so ancient that nobody will apply and comply, and then there will be massive disrespect of the rule of law. So we have to be agile.
Okay, excellent. And I suppose if I can ask you one more thing around the area of bridges. We saw the EU General Court rejected the LATOM challenge last September. So that's preserved the data flow between EU and US. And I can't have you on and not ask, did that judgment feel like a vindication of the pragmatic work that CIPL's been doing? And does it give businesses a bit of room to breathe?
Yeah. No, yes, it does. But look, this decision is being challenged as well. So we're going to have appeal now, and we're going to have the Tom time too. We cannot stop data flows. It's not realistic. We cannot have rules that do not fit reality, because then the whole house of cards of European legal system is going to collapse. So I really. We at CIPL, and there are many others as well who are really going to be talking a lot about this. There are ways in which data can be transferred legally and with accountability and with trust. There are systems in the US as well that enable for that. Matt, US is not the only, there are other countries where we perhaps have got more concerns about data use, right? And this is now starting to also play a little bit. So at the moment, the companies have got some legal certainty, but it's not for sure. It is on shaky legs. I do hope that we do preserve that. There are some interesting initiatives by OECD and G20. Japan started the data free flows with trust. How do we deliver that trust between nations and like-minded nations so that we can share data? There's some interesting initiatives such as cross-border privacy rules. I really encourage people to look at this. It's an alternative to European model, but one that is very much based on the kind of fact that countries and companies who adhere to CBPR are certifiable by third party, and then they can share data across the borders and with other countries in a trusted way. There's been good work done by OECD as well on the government access to data and what kind of principles we all need to abide. So as I said, there are elements of bridges. We just need to keep working on them all the time and talking about the alternative doesn't exist. There's no way where we could have digital fortresses and copies of data centers. What's this going to do to environment? I don't know. I mean, to cybersecurity, if you have proliferation of data centers, it's going to be disaster. So it's a very, very difficult conversation, but one that we absolutely all need to have. And I would urge business leaders to really put this in the agenda. This needs to be discussed at the highest levels at the World Economic Forum, at the UN level, at this AI summit that is happening now in India, because really it is about data as a commodity for the world, but world which isn't anymore perhaps unified as it used to be. And there are lots of barriers to this sort of data use.
Yes, and as you say, you're balancing that up against so much exposure and so much resource use. And yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. And look, if I can ask you sort of one more quickly about the future of regulation, you I believe have advocated for a risk-based approach.
Yes.
So regulators shouldn't treat a spam filter, say, and we've touched on this, as the same way they would a medical diagnosis. They're not the same thing. Are European regulators accepting that nuance, or do you feel that they're still looking for zero risk, black and white?
Right. It depends. I think the answer is it depends. I think and we've identified this in kind of our look at the 6 years of GDPR. I think they have forgotten about risk-based approach broadly. We haven't seen very much consideration of risk in any of the guidance, including data flows. Government access to data doesn't happen to IT logs, right? Because they don't care about that. They care about financial data, about maybe emails, right? Communications data, but they don't care about sort of HR data, right? That goes to the US or globally. And so you can't submit all data to the same rules. So we have really been insisting on more using the ability that is in GDPR and other laws to use that risk-based approach. And in 3 ways, right? First of all, as you write new rules, all those countries who are thinking about AI and there'll be another technology, neurotech is coming, quantum. You can't write rules that you have to think about the risks and harms and benefits as well. So you have to write rules which are able to be calibrated based on risk, right? Secondly, companies need to build compliance programs based on risks, and they know that. Smart companies, they know that. They're going to focus on areas where there could be risks to them and to people and from their products, right? And not everything is the same. And then finally, regulators must interpret the rules, develop guidance, enforce the rules with risk in mind. Concentrate on areas where there really is a harm to masses of people. What is missing at the moment, Matt, is that we don't have a very good way to measure those risks against benefits. I talked about the benefits of use of data, AI in health and science, in fraud prevention, cybersecurity. All of these are real cases that we have to use data, right? And so there could be risks to few, but there could be benefits to many, and we have to be able to better balance that. So for me, when you think about the next generation of rules, we need rules which are principle-based. It's like an onion, sort of principle, risk-based approach. Then we need accountability, organizational accountability, which I think to me is more important than the rules. And that should be incentivized and encouraged by regulators. Those who do well should be more allowed to put their products in the market, should be easier in procurement to move on. And then we have this kind of regulatory wrapper. You need smart and innovative regulators with innovative tools like regulatory sandboxes, where we can kind of bring new products and services in a closed sandbox where we can experiment, a bit like in financial services. So this is now starting with data protection. It's going to happen in AI. We've just written a paper on this as well. We think new tools like that, the new regulatory behaviors are going to be needed for the new world. With the current rules, current approach doesn't really work very well. It's analog approach to kind of digital future.
Yes, well said. Okay, and then if I can push you for a final thought, if you could snap your fingers and change one misconception policymakers have about how AI actually works in the real world, what would it be?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, AI is not static. It's super dynamic. It's evolving all the time. And I think I worry that we are now dealing with things that really, we still talk about training data, and is personal data part of training data set, and what legal basis we use for training when data has been trained and it's going to be trained, and we are now moving with agentic AI and, almost general intelligence. So they really have to throw away the misconception that this is just scary, risky, and the precautionary principle. You can't do it unless it's kind of the law says you can. Well, I think it has to be the other way around. We have to accept that this technology has got huge benefits, huge ability to change and do things. But yes, there will be risks and challenges. And so you don't stop people, putting scissors on the market or irons because they can kill other people or burn people. You can't do that, right? So I think it's really changing the mindset. It's not about saying no, it's about saying yes, but how do we put our arms around it? And as and when there are risks, and there will be new risks, there will be new uses or misuses of technology, right? That's when we also then start, okay, well, what are the agile tools that we might have in our arsenal to quickly fix that, to work with those that have been producing the technology. So really, it's really, I would say, maybe mindset change, and then willingness to enter into dialogue with technologists, with companies. We need better dialogue. We can't be in ivory towers, regulators, lawmakers, and then this world out there creating this incredible new technologies in the world, and no, the two are not speaking. And that's why we as CIPL, we really believe in our mission is to bring these together and to create solutions which are more which fit really the reality, and which are created not just by policy lawmakers, lawyers, but also by technologists and data scientists, because they're the ones who actually ultimately want to also create the right product, the right tool. Nobody comes to work and says, today I'm going to violate, discriminate against people or misuse children's data. Nobody does that, right? Majority of people are not like that. So that's really, so it's really mindset change and willingness to enter this dialogue.
Bojana, I think that's the perfect place to leave it. Thank you. So whether it's the shift we've talked about from that tick box compliance at the beginning to true accountability, or the move towards delegated trust, I think it's clear from what you said that the accountability revolution you've championed, it's no longer a luxury. It's really the only way forward for sustainable innovation. Look, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your perspective on where the bridges are being built in 2026.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thanks for the opportunity.
Right. Appreciate it. And look, for our listeners, if you want to dive deeper into the work Bojana and her team are doing at the Centre for Information Policy Leadership, you can find their latest white papers and policy deep dives at informationpolicycentre.com. And I also highly recommend following Bojana on LinkedIn for her real-time takes on global regulatory shifts. As always, thanks for tuning in to the AI Governance Podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and share it with your colleagues in the AI governance space.